You may have heard the saying, consistency is key. That sounds pretty important, right? But key to what? Why do you need to be consistent, and in what way do you need to be consistent? Consistency is about showing up in the same way in a predictable manner. But it's not about being boring. You can still be creative and have fun, but there needs to be certain predictable elements. It's about creating that feeling of stability rather than being boring, but not so crazy that no one knows what you're doing. It makes your audience feel like they know what to expect while also allowing elements of surprise. Basically, you aren't confusing them or losing them. They can spot your brand even when you do something new because there's certain consistent elements and a feeling and vibe that you're using that they instantly know it's from you. Consistency is the key to growth and loyalty. If you want to attract more people to your brand, you need to be consistent. And it helps those who know you become more loyal and more attached to your business. So let's look at the 5 areas that staying consistent in your branding is going to help you with. Firstly, branding will help make your business more recognizable. When your brand visuals have the same feeling and message behind them, people are going to instantly recognize them. You'll get those comments like, I always know your Pinterest pins, and comments like, I knew that had to be your brand. Building up recognition is important, and it makes your brand feel more familiar and comfortable. When somebody enjoys seeing your content and they're just scrolling through things and they spot out one that's from you, they're instantly like, oh, I really like what that person does, and they'll go and click on it. Whereas if you were constantly changing things and not being consistent, they might easily scroll by and miss it. So it builds loyalty and trust. And gets your brand in front of the same people over and over again, which of course builds a stronger connection to them and also keeps you top of mind. So that when they need a particular product or service that you offer, or they hear about someone else that needs it, you're top of mind. They know to go to you because you've constantly been consistently getting in front of them, and they're like, oh yeah, that person. And so you're going to be the first person they think of. It also makes your brand memorable. You want to stick in people's minds. Consider, how would someone describe your brand visuals to a friend if they couldn't remember the name of your brand and they were just trying to think of the visual elements to try and jog their memory? What things would stick out as memorable? For example, think of them saying something like, that brand with all the palm leaves and coconuts and girls sipping exotic drinks, all illustrated and in bright colors. It's about combining differentiation and your unique style with consistency. So having a style and look that stands out and is different from what else is in your industry, and then being consistent with it, constantly showing up with that style. When you get clear on your brand messaging and create a brand style that's rooted in that message rather than just, running after trends or what everyone else in your industry is doing, then you'll be able to create a brand style that's unique, and you'll actually want to stick to it because there's a purpose behind it and you're not just doing it to try and stand out. Then you're going to start staying really consistent with it, and it's going to become very recognizable and memorable. So remember, it does need to be rooted in that message, because if you're just trying to stand out for the sake of standing out, then you'll be that one-hit wonder. People will see your crazy, really interesting, clever graphics, and then you'll realize that it's not really suiting anymore, and then you change it again and again. And so there's no real consistency, and you end up losing people. So it's important that there's consistency there. And there can be consistency in different ways. It doesn't mean it always has to be the exact same look and style all the time. It can be the same vibe and message behind it. That's why it's so important to get clear on that. Because as long as it has that same feeling, if you need to pivot and change over time, as long as that feeling stays the same, then it's going to end up still having this memorable, recognizable element to it. Consistency also means a higher chance of people taking notice, because there's a thing they call the magic of 7. It often can take people 7 times of hearing or seeing something for it to actually click, for them to actually really register it. So the more you're staying consistent and keeping in front of people, the more likely they'll eventually click and be like, I keep seeing those graphics, I should check that brand out. But if you're constantly changing things, then they're going to easily just keep scrolling by, not really taking notice, or maybe one day they have a look but then they forget about it again because you weren't continually showing up in the same style and piquing their interest, so they eventually go, I keep seeing that, I should check that out. You've really got to keep going in front of them in that same style. And notice how you do this yourself. Notice how you don't really get invested into a brand or really checking out their content regularly until you've seen them a few times. Notice how you may have initially noticed just a post from them and maybe just checked it out briefly and then moved on. And then another time you were looking at them on Instagram and then you saw something else from them. And over time, as you started to get more and more exposure to them, you started to feel more familiar with them and you started to trust them more and you started to become more invested in what they were doing. And so you started showing up more to try and find out what they were offering. And so think about how you need to be doing that yourself too. You need to keep getting in front of people, and by having a consistent style, people are going to realize and click that they keep seeing that. Consistent branding also shows that you're professional and trustworthy. It shows that you took the time to create a brand identity that is professional and you're serious about, that you really invested the thought and effort into it and you're consistent with it, and then people are going to trust you because of that, because they can see you put so much effort into your branding and consistently showing up with that beautiful brand, and that you're not constantly changing your mind, flitting about and mucking about with it like it's some kind of hobby. And so they'll think, well, you'll probably be doing that too with your services and products. You're probably quite serious about it, have taken a lot of time to think it through and do it properly, and you're not going to be constantly changing things on them or being confusing or flaky and unreliable. And so they're going to start to really trust you more. They'll see that you take care and that you're worth investing in, and that's a really important thing to be trying to build up. And finally, being consistent actually makes things easier for you. We all want to be doing less, right? Well, at least less of the things that we don't need to be doing. And it's the same when it comes to creating graphics. You don't need to be constantly starting from scratch all the time, trying to come up with a completely new look and style and everything all from scratch. Who has time for that with every single graphic you have to make? And so if you have certain key elements, and you're also very specific about the overall feeling, style, vibe, the kind of imagery and look that you should be using, fonts and colors that need to be used, and any specific ways that they have to be used, having rules and guidelines, then having those constraints actually makes design so much easier. And you're actually going to be more creative, because constraints actually create more creativity. When the possibilities are endless, well, you just end up making something that's not quite as good because it's just so open-ended. When you have constraints and things that you have to work within, then you get more creative how you can use those things in a fun, creative way. And so you actually create better graphics in less time because you have those consistent constraints in your branding. And the way that you do that is by having a style guide. So having all the elements that you need for your brand in a guide, and also specifying things about the vibe and feeling and how things should be used, like how certain fonts should only be used for certain things, how certain colors should only be used for certain things, certain size or shape restrictions, anything that you think is important. Make sure you spend the time getting that really specific so that later on it's so much easier to create graphics and they're consistent, and you can have more fun being creative because you've set good boundaries and constraints for yourself. So I hope you found this video helpful and inspiring, and it's got you thinking about how you need to be more consistent, maybe even how you need to dig a little deeper in your style guide and make sure it's really specific so that you can show up more consistently and so you can make your life easier too. And of course, if you'd like to learn more about graphic design, branding and creativity, then be sure to subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you next time.